Welcome to episode 90 of Fresh Air at 5. In this episode, you're going to hear from Tom Schimmer, George Koros, and some others. Lainey Rowell, Gabriel Carrillo, and Chris Woods. And we also have, who do I listen to today? I'm recording this starting on the Friday. But anyhow, we have Craig Kemp as well as Dave Schmitto and Miriam Platinsky as they share on their different podcasts, respective places, and I learned a lot of things this week. One of the biggest things that I learned and saw this week was the filters of our lives. That's why this is called Filters of Our Lives. In the second segment, as I introduce the George Koros listening that I did with Mindset Mondays, I will talk more about this. But how does the filters and algorithms of our social media and streaming services affect our intake of content? All right, with that, here we go, episode 90, Fresh Air at 5.
I'm Anne, co-host of Transparency in Teaching, a part of the Education Podcast Network, just like the show you're listening to now. Shows on the network are individually owned, and opinions expressed may not reflect others. Find other interesting education podcasts at edupodcastnetwork.com.
Welcome to Fresh Air at 5, the podcast. I'm your host, Brian Carpenter. Fresh Air at 5 is my regular attempt to exercise by walking about my neighborhood to take in podcast content, then reflect in an unedited video, which I finally post to my Twitter channel. This podcast will be a regular collection of the audio from these selfie videos. You can follow me on Twitter at FreshAir@5 or check out my website, briancarpenter.com, for other content I have created and collected. Hey, PLN, Monday, September 19, 2022. Today is the National Day of Mourning, where we have been given a day off to mourn the death of our Queen as she passed away recently. And the funeral apparently happened this morning at 3 o'clock a.m. my time, not that time in England, but it happened. And I will look for highlights of that later today as I think about our Queen and the role that she's played in our world that we live in today. Many may not agree with the ways of England and the monarchy and things like that. I don't exactly 100% know where I feel about that, but connected to colonialism, connected to progression of a nation over other nations, and in our world today, that can be tenuous and tough. All right, so out for Fresh Air at 5 this morning. My wife commented to me yesterday, she says, "You do a lot of things." As I'm sitting at the table doing Wordle. I do my Wordle, and when I do my Wordle, I jump into Twitter Space and I share my results with Jeff Heil and Mary Krause and Mary Manzano and Stephen B. Jensen. And so I don't know some of these people, but it's a community that we have come to sharing our thoughts about Wordle and how that goes. I'm also part of the Teachers on Fire crew. We have a Twitter chat where we all share our things, and there's Phil and Heather and Jennifer and Tim Cavey, and there's some others that are in there. And you know what? It's important to me to connect, and that's one of the things that I do. Another way that I connect and do every day is Be Real. And the Be Real social network is very small compared to like Twitter and Instagram things. But I got on there. I got Tom Schimmer because Tom invited me to be part of his Be Real. We got Natalie Vadaboso out of Calgary. And I've never met Natalie, but I'm getting to know her because I see real things, as well as Emily Feltner. All right, I'm coming back. I got more to say. One more thing for September 19, 2022. Yeah, just continuing my thoughts about what my wife said, that I got a lot of things that I do. I do Be Real, I do Wordle, and I've got communities in those spaces where I connect with people and we cheer each other on and we cry over each other's struggles. But also I Pokemon Go. And I play Pokemon Go every morning on my Fresh Air at 5 walk, so that's another little thing that I do. What are the other things? There's probably others, but I can't remember them right now. But yes, I do a few things. Another one is Fresh Air at 5 and trying to get out for my walk every day. Some days I listen to podcasts because of distractions like sockeye salmon fishing and other things. Does distract, but it's important to me, and so here I am. All right, this morning, as I'm listening to walking Fresh Air at 5, I listened to the Tom Schimmer show, and Tom brings us 3 segments: the Don't At Me section on Reborn a Critic. And Tom, I really like your thoughts on being a critic and how you would like to be reborn a critic because it'd be like the best life ever, and you wouldn't have to innovate and do any hard work other than pick apart all the innovations of the young and things like that. So, okay, you got to listen to what Tom says, because it'll get you thinking about how critical you are of what other people are doing and whether you should be that way or not. Another section he had on was his interview with Livia Chan. And Livia and Tom, thanks so much for sharing. And Livia, you know what? I appreciate the little bit of time that we have spent together. We had lunch that one day with Tim Cavey and Tim Stevenson and Walder. Can't remember her first name. But anyhow, we downtown Vancouver, that was a couple of summers ago, 2 summers ago. And, you know, relationships are key and primary. And that's what you talked about with Tom, and how you build relationships and why you build relationships and what that's going to do. The last section. So yeah, take a listen to this interview with Tom and Livia, and you'll be encouraged as you pursue growing your relationships with people. Coming back, hang on. The last thing for September 19, 2022, as I'm wrapping up my 3rd segment here, I'm still reflecting on the Tom Schimmer show that came out today, where it's titled Reborn a Critic, his interview with Livia Chan, and then Synthesizing Standards. In Assessment Corner, Tom, you talk about boiling down the standards to make them manageable as you work through all the main big ideas and making things manageable for you as a teacher and for a learning community. And this is something that I am learning to do and work on as I work with my face-to-face students. So I'm working on it, and I'm learning a little bit more every day as I work through how to boil the things down so that they're manageable, and to see the activities that I'm doing and how it meets more than one standard. And it's coming along. So take a listen to this. It's about the minutia of 4.1, 4.2, and 4.3, and out of Tom's conversation that he had recently with the teachers out in Waikiki when he was out there doing some training. All right. Hey, thanks, Tom. Appreciate it. And one day we should go for coffee. I think so. That would be fantastic. I'll see how it goes, when we can connect, and we should make that happen. All right. We'll talk to you all later. Have a fabulous week. Welcome to Monday, and without further ado, I got to go watch some of the Queen's funeral and a little bit of that, and dig into working on tidying up my online courses and figuring out accounts for students as we get started at the beginning of our school year. Peace. Bye. Hey, PLN, Tuesday, September 20th, 2022. Good morning. It's Tuesday. Here we are. And we're crashing into a week. It's a shorter week-ish because we didn't have to go into our school buildings yesterday due to the National Day of Mourning. But on the flip side of that, I had to work. I had things I needed to do yesterday because they need to get done. Back-end paperwork, student accounts, things like that. But what slowed me down was that the people that I needed help from were not there because they weren't working. And so I'm hoping that as we get into today and I see my students for the first time, that I will have some accounts in hand to do some work in digital spaces. Otherwise, it's going to be quite challenging. So I'm feeling rather stressed out actually right now. Another important reason to get out this morning and get some fresh air so I can clear my head and I can think about things a bit differently. Yes. So one thing that I came into my mind is that, you know what, I haven't heard from George Couros. I haven't heard from some other podcasters that I've been listening to, because I'm thinking, going, have they released podcasts? And you know, in our world of algorithms and feeding you what you like and what you listen to, and as opposed to all of it and me making choices, my podcatcher, Apple Podcaster app, has made some choices that I don't like, actually. One of those is that I have missed a number of episodes over the summer from some of my favorite people, and I need to go back into my library and dig some of those out and figure out how to get them back into the queue, as opposed to what the algorithm says, you know, should be the queue, the listen now. So one of those people is George Couros, as I mentioned, and I look back and he's been recording all summer long, and I have not listened to George because it didn't come in front of mine, so I gotta change that. So sorry, George, for that. I gotta do better than my podcaster player is doing. I'm coming right back to talk about it. Okay, bye. One more thing for September 20, 2022. So as I was talking about the filters that affect our lives, have you thought about that? What gets to you through your social media is affected by filters, and in some ways that's good, but in some ways that's bad. So my podcast listening has been affected by the filters and the algorithms that have brought me the most recent things that I've listened to, and pushed away the things that I haven't listened to. So George Couros and the Innovator's Mindset podcast is one of my favorites that I've listened to in the past, and has been taken out of my queue because I missed a couple episodes and other things were there in front. So George, on episode 1 of season 3 of Mindset Monday, one of my favorite things that you've done that I've listened to consistently was you talking about 4 things to remember when you're going through change. And at the outset, I, because I've missed episodes, have missed that you have gone on a journey. I don't even know where. I'm guessing Florida, guessing something like that, because you talk about that here in this episode, but I don't actually know where, and I don't even know why. So forgive me. It's Apple Podcast fault, so I'm just gonna say that. But no, it's me, because I wasn't paying attention like I could have been. So on this episode, you talk about 4 things to remember as you're going through change, and some of those things, and I don't have all of them in front of me, is that you got to remember why you're making the change in the first place. What has brought you to this place? And in the middle of a transition, you got to go look down the road 3 to 6 months and go, how is this going to be then, as opposed to right now? Because when you're doing the nitpicky things, it's hard. Another is to not forget the routines of life, so that you can keep those going. Asking for help early so you don't make major screw ups. And finally, I can't remember. So that's it. Take a listen to this episode by George. Another one more thing for September 20, 2022, listening to season 3, episode 2 of Mindset Monday with George Couros on Innovator's Mindset podcast. George brings us the topic of accountability to others, and how we need to be accountable to others to take care of them and to take care of ourselves. And when we say we're going to do something, to actually do that. You know, he talked about having a commitment to posting his blog and his podcast and things like that, that are, they're for himself, but they're for other people. And having them there so other people can expect those things, that's important. My podcast, Fresher at 5, has typically come out on Friday night at midnight, and I've set it up to schedule to do that. I'm not sitting up at midnight on Friday night pressing the button, because I got sleep to get and other things I'm doing with my family, but I put it out there so that on Saturday morning you can see it in your podcast catcher, and it can go for you, and it's there, and that's important. Being on time. He talked about getting your class ready at the end of class so that they're not late for the next class, and taking care of that person. You make a commitment to go exercise, you better get outside and do that. Like for myself, part of me getting out the door in the morning is that I'm actually listening to podcasts to learn, and I'm reflecting on those, and I'm recording a video that goes into my own podcast. So if I don't get out the door for my walk, I'm not taking care of my podcast listeners, and there's about 40 of you out there in the world, and that's a commitment to me that's important. So thank you for listening, and thanks George for Mindset Monday, episode 2 of season 3. Looking forward to another couple later this week. I'm not going to listen to the whole series right now because I'm playing catch up, but I will take a listen a bit later this week. All right, peace. I got something else to listen to. Okay, bye. The last thing for September 2022, wrapping up my walk this morning, I listened to EdTech Bites with George Carrillo out of Texas, and he is sitting down this morning as I'm walking eating s'mores because he is talking about 5 reasons why you should create newsletters, and he's highlighting the S'more newsletter tool that they have. So I haven't used S'more myself. I've read lots of S'more newsletters, Gabriel, and I think I called you Gabriel earlier, and maybe George. I'm so sorry. So as I listen to this, I get distracted as I'm walking because the car pulls up in front of me. But you talked about using S'more, which is a web-based newsletter creation tool that you can then send out to your audience, and they can listen to it or read it. They can read it. It's easy to update. It's informative. You, in this episode, talk about 5 reasons to create newsletters, and those are great 5 reasons. I'm going to share this episode with my media design classes. We are going to be digging into working on the school newsletter this year, and they're going to learn how to do some desktop publishing. Maybe change the tool. We're going to change the tool. We've been working in Google Slides this past 3 or 4 years for our newsletter with my students, but we're going to change it up because we're moving out of Google into Microsoft. So I got to maybe consider using Sway. My colleague, he's been talking about that I should consider that for getting the newsletter out, and it's a different mindset. It's maybe like Adobe Spark Pages was, or maybe even S'more, in a way that we can make more of a web-based newsletter as opposed to a paper 8.5 by 11 based newsletter. That's a shift, Shouldn't a newsletter be 8.5 by 11? Those are questions, and so these are things we got to consider as we're moving forward and changing from Google to Microsoft. All right. Have a great day, everybody. And, Gabe, did you make that on the spot, that S'more? That's fantastic. I like eating s'mores, but there's a place for them. That's when I'm out camping. So I don't eat s'mores at home, but I eat them when I'm camping. Okay, talk to you. Bye. Hey, PLN, Wednesday, September 21, 2022. Welcome to Wednesday. I hope you're having a good day already. And for me, it's early. Not a lot of the day has happened already, but it's good so far. Yes, the update's going on. It's the eve of fall equinox. It happens tomorrow morning here at, I think, 6:35 a.m. So we will be turning the seasons from summer to fall. And the weather is getting cooler. This morning it's about 14 degrees Celsius, so not super cool yet, but it's nice to have the cooler temperatures and not the blazing hot in the day. Yesterday we reached 30 degrees in the afternoon, so it was warming up. Looking in the sky, we've got a thin crescent of a moon up there, and it'll be a new moon probably by Friday. Super excited about that because it just changes a whole lot of things. Okay. as I'm walking, this is part of the filters of our lives. Well, at least the filters of my podcatcher, as I am going back in the library to listen to some podcasts that I've missed because of the filters that Apple Podcast Player has put in to take out some of those less frequent podcasts that I've listened to. And so one of those is the STEM Everyday podcast with Chris Woods. And Chris, good to hear your voice this morning as I turn on episode 232 of your podcast that's titled Samsung Solving for Tomorrow contest. And it's talking about this national contest in the United States that Samsung has. And Ann Wu, the Senior Director of Development and Citizenship or something for Samsung, talks about this along with Kevin Lay out of Florida about the impact of doing STEM projects like this and on a grander scale, and just having not the grandness of the scale, but having a grand audience to present to, pitch to, and work through a problem so that they can present a problem. So that's the Samsung Solve for Tomorrow problem or project, and you can take a look at it on their Samsung website. Thanks, Chris. Good to hear your voice. Bye. The last thing for September 21, 2022. Hey, thanks for coming along with me this morning. Thanks for walking and listening to what I'm talking about. And in this last segment, I listened to Evolving with Gratitude with Lainey Rowell. And she has her podcast that is an encouraging, heartwarming conversation she has with an educator talking about gratitude and gratitude practices. This morning on episode 23, I listened to Lainey talk with Ray Hewart, who is one of my education rock stars, and just watching her present herself as an educator publicly with the Teach Better team. And Ray and I go way back to probably 2018, 2019 or something like that, as I started listening to the Teach Better Talk podcast. And I listened to these two people, Jeff Gargas and herself, talk about education, and then they would have an interview with an educator, and it was great educator stories. And the Teach Better team has been a part of my journey as an educator, and in a kind of an unofficial way. Well, I mean official. I listen to their podcasts a lot and hear their stories and talk and are challenged by the things they talk about. I was a guest on Teach Better Talk with Ray and Jeff, so Ray and I've actually talked in the past, and Jeff and I and Dave Schmitto talked back in June, and it's on their Teach Better YouTube channel for an afternoon check-in thing, and that was a lot of fun. But Ray, you know what? Thank you so much, Ray, for sharing yourself with us and being vulnerable with us and writing your books and being part of this organization that I have been connected to vicariously, and just I'm around people that are connected to it. Tim Stevenson is part of the Teach Better Podcast Network with his show Science 360, and Dave Schmitto and also Josh Stamper, talking with them and listening to their podcasts. So take a listen to this, people. Be grateful. And Ray, gratitude fuels positivity. Peace out. Bye. Hey PLN, happy September 23rd, Friday. You made it to the end of the week. I'm saying that for myself because it has been a full, rich, and engaging and woolly and has teeth biting you week with all the different tasks and difficulties that I have faced this week. But we're here at Friday, and I'm thankful for being here at Friday. All right, this morning as I'm out walking, the title of this podcast this week is The Filters of Our Lives. And I get that from looking at how my podcast listening has been filtered by my podcatcher that, has taken out the ones that I haven't listened to very recently and put them in my library, and expects me to go back and look up the podcasts that I've listened to in the past. And so one of them, Dave Schmittou on Lasting Learning Podcast, is one of those that I didn't listen to very regularly for a little bit, and therefore got shuffled to the back. And so Dave Schmittou, I apologize. I am back now, and I'm listening to episode 205 of Lasting Learning Podcast as you interviewed Miriam Platinsky. I apologize, Miriam, for saying your name incorrectly, but she's an educator in the States, and she is about rattling cages and making a difference in the world. I really appreciated your conversation you had as you talked about the have to learn and the want to learn. That's a topic that's been in my head that's the way I'm framing what I heard you talking about this morning, is how do we get kids to want to be there as opposed to have to be there? There's a fine line between those. We as learners and as adult learners are in that same kind of position. We have an obligation to be there to learn, but if we can take that one step further and be there that we want to learn, that totally takes the learning to a so different level. Being lifelong learners is important, and that is what I feel my primary job as an educator, as a teacher is to change my students into lifelong learners. Thanks, Dave and Miriam. I appreciate the conversation. For more, take a listen to episode 205, the last thing for September 23, 2022. As I'm wrapping up my week of walking, and I missed it yesterday, and it was fall equinox yesterday morning at 6:35 a.m. my time. It's been a week. Okay, so as I'm wrapping up, I listened to episode 103 of the Ignite EdTech podcast. This comes on the heels of episode 102 that I listened to last week as I was out fishing, and Craig talked about Quizalize and with one of the developers at Quizalize last week. I think his name was Derek, but I can't recall. But this week he talks with Charles Wiles, who is a founder and CEO of Quizalize and Zish, Z-I-S-H. This is a new platform that I haven't heard of before, and so I'm going to have to take a look at that, Charles and Craig. And so thank you so much, Craig, for bringing Charles on your podcast to share Charles's passion for what he's doing. It's so important that we watch people with passion do what they do as we grow our passion for what we do. You talked, Craig, in here about being more spontaneous in your teaching and your way you deliver, and not sticking to the plan so much, but being willing to divert and diverge your direction that the thing is going from what your plan is for your classroom. And I see that that's what you've done now. You had a plan for a different guest on episode 103, but because of your daughter's excitement for what she saw going on in her classroom with Quizalize after she came home, you said you needed to bring this to the fore a lot sooner than putting it off one or two episodes. So thank you, Charles, for responding quickly to Craig as he had a spontaneous idea. You know, we have this thing about spontaneity that, how do you plan for spontaneity? Do you just not have a plan? Or do you have a plan and being willing to go off script when you need to? That's like improv. So with that, I want to say thanks. Have a fabulous week all, and we will see you next week. As my one word for 2021 is appreciate, I appreciate you giving me a listen as I've created this podcast experience for you. It's a unique Blinkist or Coles Notes version of the content I take in, like a highlight reel, so that you can hopefully find other interesting podcasts you may not have considered before. I've recorded the specific podcast episodes in the show notes for your learning convenience. Please subscribe so you don't miss any of my upcoming episodes. And if you enjoy this podcast and its format, share it with someone else. Tweet about your experience or give it a review on Apple Podcast or wherever you listen to podcasts. Fresh Air at 5 can also be found on Voice Ed Radio. Your voice is right here, and on the Education Podcast Network, podcasts for educators, podcasts by educators. I hope you have a fantastic day and get some fresh air before the day is out, and take care of yourself because you're worth it.